Monica Smith rose to prominence during Melbourne's brutal COVID lockdowns after she was arrested and put in jail for 22 days. Her crime? She refused to sign draconian bail conditions after being charged with incitement after she published an anti-lockdown protest poster on social media. Monica is now suing Victoria Police to try and get some justice for not just herself, but for everyone who was abused by the police during the Daniel Andrews brutal COVID lockdowns. A trial date has been set for July 23. 15 days have been set aside in the County Court of Victoria. Monica Smith joins me now. Monica, thanks for your time today. Is justice within reach?
That's wow. Starting off with a big question there. Look, justice is actually not available to everybody. That is something that I have found out during this court process. You have to have resilience, you have to have support, and you have to be able to mentally go through 3 or 4 years of litigation before you even get to go to trial. So is justice in reach? Well, it is if enough people persevere all the way till the end.
Yeah, so Monica, you have brought this case, so others who, like Topher Field and others who have been involved in legal action have been defending themselves. They've been defendants. You're the plaintiff. What has it taken to mount a case against Victoria Police and get it to trial?
Over 3.5 years of back and forth, lots of and at many points you get intimidated and people explain to you the risks and and all of that. And so there are so many points in which you want to run away, I've got to be honest. So it's taken 3.5 years. And just to reiterate, I'm actually taking them to court for arresting me 3 times in one day on October 31st, 2020. So it's actually not about the prison case. That one's coming next.
Okay. So you're suing them for wrongful arrest. Is that essentially it?
Unlawful arrests and deprivation of liberty. I was an independent journalist at the time and I had all my correct paperwork with me, but they just literally ignored me and didn't care.
Yeah, and they arrested you. So you were filming, reporting on a COVID lockdown protest, an anti-COVID lockdown protest, and you were arrested. You were thrown in a paddy wagon, and then you were put in jail. So you're saying there'll be a separate case that you'll bring about your incarceration.
That's right. So I didn't actually go to jail that day. I was only in the back of the police van for 45 minutes, and the jail case is a completely separate one, and that will take another 3 years through the court systems before we're talking about it like this again.
What sort of legal advice have you got then to say that you've got a case? I mean, the police presumably will argue that you were involved in an unlawful assembly against health regulations. Why do you say that's wrong?
Well, it's really important to separate my personality now and my personality in October 2020. I had only started RDA 6 weeks before this happened. And in actual fact, Lyle, I was staying in my lane. I was a journalist. I had never made a speech. I had never carried a banner. I was obviously biased and I was absolutely anti-lockdown, and I don't have to deny that whatsoever. But RDA was actually actively doing journalism and there was no blurred lines. It's really important to separate me now and me then. So I do definitely have an argument.
Yeah, so RDA, of course, for people who don't know, is Reignite Democracy, an organisation you founded. So you'll be arguing you were simply reporting, you weren't breaching any health rules or regulations, and I presume you can prove that.
That's right. I had the same work permit that any of the mainstream media journalists had. I had the same work permit as anybody that was there that day that didn't get arrested 3 times in one day. So yes, I think my argument is good. And of course, they have an argument too, but it's going to be up to the courts to decide which argument wins. What
do you think the ramifications of this case will be? If you win, will this set a precedent for others?
Look, that is my dream. And of course, in the ruling, the judge will obviously write, pages and pages of each particular point. And even if, let's say, for example, I don't win the case, I might win some arguments. And even that paragraph, for example, that has one argument in it that I win, that can be used in future cases. And my dream is that independent journalists in the future, if anything like this was to happen again, aren't afraid to go out on the streets. And maybe Victoria Police were confused, maybe they made mistakes, but they need to be accountable for those mistakes so that we can move forward. And when it happens again, they need to treat independent journalists the same as mainstream media journalists, because we are living in a country where there is no accreditation for street journalism. And if they want to create an accreditation or a 3-day course or create a barrier between the two, they can do that through the courts or through Parliament. But at the moment in Australia, there is nothing against being a street journalist. And there's also nothing against being a biased journalist who enjoys the event that they happen to be filming. So there's a really important argument that's not just about me. It's also about anyone else that wants to go out on the streets and report.
Yeah, well, I guess the images that endure from that period are the pregnant woman being arrested, the old lady being thrown to the ground and pepper sprayed. Many of these images are available on your website and freely available on the net. A lot of brutality, a lot of force that seemed, beyond reasonable proportion. Are you going to be arguing on behalf of those sort of people as well, or is your case narrowly defined to your role as a citizen journalist?
Well, of course, I'm only allowed to bring in my own story, because then it would be irrelevant and the court would obviously shut that down pretty quickly. However, there's never been a case like this where someone from our side of things is the plaintiff. So I am hoping that people see it as an opportunity to share in our misery, but also in our joy. And I'm sure I hope hundreds of people will be there on the day. Not because my story exactly represents them, but because it represents what we all went through during that time. Yeah. And there's never been a situation where the police have been on the witness stand for anything that they did during COVID, because let's be honest, Lyle, most people take a deal, and I don't judge them for that, because they have different lifestyles, they have families, they have mortgages. I don't have any of those things, you see. So when someone takes a deal, the public never, ever know about it. So I'm just hoping I can air something, anything. And, I'm a believer in God, and I don't have a strategy. I just have the truth. And I feel like that should be enough, but it's not always in the court of law. So I'm just going to try my best, and we'll just see what happens.
No, there absolutely needs to be a reckoning for what's gone on here. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But Monica, I just want to put something to you, and hear me out on this. I have to confess, I wasn't someone who was out on the streets protesting at the time. I didn't like what was going on. I was living in Sydney towards the end of the COVID period. I thought the protests here were a bit premature. I didn't think we needed that level of civil disobedience. And quite frankly, I thought some of the leaders of the Sydney protests there were some extremists, I think, which undermined the credibility, in my opinion. I also think that they happened towards the end of the COVID period, where the end was in sight. Now, if I'd lived in Melbourne, I might have had a different view. I didn't like what was happening, as I said, but nonetheless, in the early days especially, I was one who gave the government the benefit of the doubt. I got vaccinated. I freely admit that people like yourself and others who were concerned much earlier and who I thought at the time were overreacting have now been well and truly vindicated. And we've seen this over and over again, most recently with Fauci's testimony before the Congress in America recently. What would your message be to people like me? I'm putting myself on the line a bit here, but just, being upfront about where I stood during that period.
Sure. Well, I think the major difference is the location. Victoria was at that point, by October, we had been in and out of lockdowns for 6 months. We're talking no kids going to school. We're talking about outdoor playgrounds being shut so that kids are stuck inside. They can't even go to the local playground. You also had situations like brothels being open and churches being closed. Okay, that hurts your brain. You can't make sense of that, right? The bottle shop would be open and the flower shop next door would be closed for Valentine's Day. And you had Anzac Day parade, for example, was cancelled. And on exactly the same day, the football stadium was full of supporters for the football game on exactly the same day. So what I would put to you is that everyday people were actually the ones who were pushing back at this point. It wasn't criminals. It wasn't seasoned protesters at all. It was Australians who were confused. And we did ask ourselves this question. I did this exercise myself. maybe Daniel Andrews is actually trying to protect us. Maybe I'm overreacting. I went through that exercise, but every time I did that, I came back to, but wait a second, the brothels are open and the churches
Yeah.
are closed.
Yeah.
It can't make sense. So I didn't want to do the things that I was doing, but we just had no choice because it was hurting our brains and no one was explaining it to us. And I'll finish in a second. But basically, if they actually were trying to protect us and they cared about how we were intaking the information that they were giving us and the rules and restrictions, they would have explained it to us. They would have been courteous and explained the health risks and the reasons, but they never showed us the evidence, and they just gaslit us and called us names and called us crazy instead of trying to help us to understand. If it was actually dangerous and they helped to make us understand it, I would have stayed home too. But it didn't make sense then, and it still doesn't make sense. And we were right. So in Victoria, it just happened to be so much more obvious that's why there was a lot more people speaking up early.
Yeah, no, that's true, and certainly things weren't quite as bad here in Sydney, although they were bad. But look, that explains it very, very well. Monica, it seems, again, as I said, that there's got to be a reckoning. It's crazy that Daniel Andrews and Mark McGowan have actually been honoured with some of Australia's highest honours. This, as you say, this is gaslighting. How do we get a reckoning? Your trial, I think, will be part of it, but I assume that the freedom movement is still pushing for a royal commission so that the mistakes can be put out there and lessons learnt, and even admissions and apologies be made where clear mistakes have been made.
Look, we live in a society where it's really going to be someone's grandson who apologises to us in 60 years' time when we're all dead. I mean, that's the kind of world we live in. But also, Daniel Andrews and Mark McGowan getting an award, it actually is completely consistent with the world that we are living in right now. Men win women's pageants nowadays. So if Daniel Andrews didn't get an award, I would be more shocked about that than him getting an award. So these things actually don't shock me anymore, and they shouldn't shock anybody because it's too much trauma to go through all the time. Now, in terms of a reckoning, well, a royal commission is usually conducted by the same people who created the problems. So I don't have much faith in a royal commission necessarily. I don't have much faith in Parliament as it stands right now because we don't have balance of power and we just keep losing everything. I mean, Conservatives do. So I think if we can change the members of Parliament, then maybe we'll get a reckoning. But the thing is often it takes 40 or 50 years for the truth to come out. Now, the truth is coming out at a very speedy rate. So maybe we might get justice for this sooner than, for example, asbestos. I mean, how long did it take for them to figure out that was going on? And then there will be a reckoning one day, but it might not be on this planet. I believe in hell, and that gives me a lot of comfort.
Well, it certainly takes determined people like yourself. History shows that people who are willing to persist and be courageous like you are the ones who bring change in these areas. Monica, I'm interested in the freedom movement, and a political party arose out of it in Victoria. You had massive protests there on the streets, hundreds of thousands of people. I was genuinely surprised that this didn't translate into votes. You talk about changing members of Parliament, but the 2022 election, a number of freedom parties, freedom candidates stood at the election, and it didn't translate into any seats in the Parliament at the 2022 election. Why do you think that was?
Well, there was too many freedom parties, which split up the group that we have. That's just obvious, I think. And the parties weren't all working together, which made it worse. And that's just human nature. Everyone says, oh, we should work together. But what they really mean is everyone should work with me. And that's a pride issue that I can't fix anytime soon. But there's also something else I've been considering lately, and that is the major parties are the ones with the votes. They're the ones who are putting in the digital ID, who are doing all the things that we don't like. And because Conservatives like me, who used to be Liberal members, left the Liberal Party, and so many did, they actually became worse. and they actually have more control than they ever did because people like us left. I know for sure that the Liberal Party especially was laughing at the freedom community in 2022 because they knew that our extreme efforts would be for nothing, because all of our votes would end up trickling down to the Liberal Party anyway. So they're laughing at us thinking, haha, you've left the party. Now you have absolutely no say in any of the candidates and any of the executive board members and things like that. And you're working 10 times harder than you would be if you were just in the Liberal Party trying to change it. So to be honest, my opinion now is that we need to, and I don't use the word infiltrate because it's not infiltrating. For example, the Liberal Party and the Labor Party has been infiltrated by the same people, and that's why they're the same party now. So people like me or people like Conservatives need to take those parties back. Traditional Labor voters need to go back, and that's what I think.
I think you're right. I think all of us have got to get involved in politics, whether it's in a minor party or getting involved in the major parties. Tucker Carlson said last weekend in Sydney, I think you were there, I saw on social media, I was there, he said we've got to treat our politicians like hired help. We should respect them, of course, but they are hired help. They're there to serve us. And I think that's what's been lost in recent years, and that's why we've all been treated so appallingly. So I really salute you, Monica, for trying to reignite democracy, for what you're doing with your court case. We'll certainly follow it with interest. And thank you so much for giving of your time today here on ADH TV.
No worries. Can I just finish by saying July 23rd, County Court of Victoria, I need your support more than ever because I'm representing myself. So I really feel like David in this David and Goliath situation. So the more people I have there, the better it's going to be for me. So thank you.
Fantastic, Monica. Go there, support. If you're in Melbourne, be at the County Court and support her on July 23. Thanks again, Monica.
Thank you.